Good day and welcome to another Mr. Kilroy presentation. More radical thoughts. It has been a while, but it's long overdue that I do a gun control video, or rather an anti-gun control video. Let's not be confused here. I am anti-gun control. Well, not really. To me, gun control is using both hands. But what would I like to talk about? Well, I would like to talk about is the fact that presently it runs, and I can only say approximately because since 2006, and that was when Mr. Harper and the Conservatives took over, the Canadian Firearms Control Program was running at about $80 million. Let me say that again. $80 million per year. Now, as the writer in the NFA article points out, is that does the $80 million year one run better than the $15 million a year one that we had in 1994? Well, we won't know because nobody's required to report to Parliament. Nobody can measure the success or failure of a program without knowing the real numbers. Now, it's not that the RCMP doesn't write reports, they write reams of reports. However, as Auditor General Sheila Fraser has pointed out, that's only evidence of activity, not efficiency or effectiveness. So here we go. $80 million per year. But see, that's not the real problem. The real problem is that the $2 billion that has been spent setting up this program. When Bill C-68 was first tabled, the question was, well, how much is all this going to cost? Then Minister of Justice Alan Rock said, oh, it's only going to cost a few $1,000,000. Well, over time, a few million ran up to a couple of $100 million, became $1 billion, and as the Auditor General has pointed out, we will never know the true cost of it because Mr. Chrétien and Alan Rock made the records top secret. That's right, top secret. Right in there with the Official Secrets Act. They are cabinet secrets protected. Nobody can look at them. Not a million Freedom of Information requests will open the door to those records. Now, $2 billion. Now, what justifies $2 billion being spent? Well, let's look at our homicide rates. Our homicide rates in Canada between the years of 1990 and 1994. Now, remember, this is 4 years, was a total of 164 firearm homicides, i.e., somebody used a gun to end somebody's life. 164. Now, what happens when we divide 164 by, at the time I believe it was 28 million people living in Canada? Let's just punch those numbers in. Wow! My calculator here won't even calculate it without expressing it as an exponent. That's 5.8. 5711428 5711428 8557 to the power of negative 6. That is absolutely minuscule of a percentage. Like you can't even begin. Well, I think I can. I would have to put 6 zeros. Move the decimal over one place and put 6 zeros between that 5 and the decimal point to get a real percentage number. 31 firearm deaths per year on average. 31. That justifies spending $2 billion to register firearms. Now, in all deference to the survivors of victims of such crimes, in all deference to you, I feel really, 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 and I mean really to the power of positive 6, 10 to the power of 6, sorry for your loss and how tragic it must have been. And it is awfully cold, soulless to think that your loved one is worth a $2 billion program. That $2 billion is not going to bring them back. And unfortunately, it would not have prevented their death whatsoever. Funny thing about homicide is that if somebody has determined to break our most sacred law, the law against the taking of another human life, are not going to be troubled by firearms laws. They will obtain a firearm. If they are so determined to use a firearm, will obtain it at any price, at any cost, from anywhere. Failing that, there's a thing called substitution. Would you feel any better if your loved one had been beaten to death or stabbed? Both. All three methods are extraordinarily grisly and gruesome. So 31 people a year justifies spending $2 billion. Now, the HARPER government, who, when they were putting together a platform before they were elected, and this was in the days of the alliance, in the the early days when those two amalgamated together to form the Canadians, or the Conservative Party of Canada. It was part of their stated policy and platform to get rid of what is commonly known or referred to among firearms owners as Bill C-68. To the layman, it is the Firearms Control Act, or simply the Firearms Act. Now, just $1 billion could have put an MRI machine in every hospital in Canada, just so that you got a frame of reference here, and still had money left over. $2 billion, as the YWCA, when it was all pro-gun control, pointed out that a lot of women and children leave their abusive spouses and they don't feel safe around firearms. Well, $2 billion could have provided a heck of a lot of shelters to you. Now, that's as far as I'm going on that one. It's not because I'm afraid to get stuck into it, but the fact of the matter is that is a subject of a completely different video. And I've already posted that one. How feminism has driven the gun control scheme in Canada. Now, going through the Canadian Shooting Sports Association paperwork. There are estimates of the operation of the firearm scheme when we still had the registry was about $130 million per year. In 10 short years, we've added another $1 billion to that. $2 billion. So there's $3 billion. And think about it. In another 10 years, $80 million a year, and I'll guarantee you the cost of running it is going to incrementally rise each and every year. It will not be long before another $1 billion has been wasted on the very people that are least likely to commit a crime. That's right, firearms owners. The least likely. Now, here's something you also need to consider too, is that $80 million per year to run this system, and it doesn't do anything other than give a license or keep track of the number of licensed firearms owners. Of course, they've got firearms. Let's not be daft here. But let's be honest here. They're going to spend $80 million a year on firearms, but they haven't spent dime one to keep track of high-risk criminals. But they spend $80 million to $80 million a year on low-risk people, but nothing on high-risk people. Does that make any sense to anybody? No, not to me, not to anyone who is a thinking person. Now, I believe I have oh God, have I prattled on about this. I'm already past 10 minutes on it. But the fact is that this was promised by the Conservative Party long ago to get rid of this pernicious, draconian piece of legislation that we call the Firearms Act, and put in something that was effective and respected the rights of the individual firearm owner. No, instead we got the carrot held out in front of our noses for 10 years. Oh, just get us to a majority government and we'll fix things. And it went from fixing it to, we'll get rid of the registry, to, oh geez, the RCMP just outlawed some more firearms. Oh, okay, well here's another amnesty for you guys. Well, we still haven't fixed the problem. And Mr. Blaney probably came out with a very good bill, but by the time the senior party members got a hold of it and went through the committee, it was probably so watered down, or it was completely watered down, and it was kind of to the point of, well, why the hell did you even bother? Just let the RCMP continue to outlaw firearms. Eventually, no one will be allowed to own them. Well, we're actually not. See, that's the trick. We're not allowed to own firearms unless we have a license. Just so that you know, a license is the government's permission for you to break a law. And it doesn't matter what it is. Now, anyways, I'm dead set against licensing firearms owners because, quite frankly, it has licensing drivers reduced drunk driving at all. Well, that's everybody's favorite analogy. Well, you need a license to drive. Well, fine. What has licensing done? And you need to consider that again. It is by virtue of and by definition of license. Whenever you get into a car, you're breaking the law. Think about that a moment. So, but the difference is that you don't get thrown in jail. But if I don't have a license, I do. And with that, I'm going to call this one done and wish everybody a wonderful day. This is Mr. Kilroy. Please subscribe. It's so lonely on my subscription list. Thank you very much. Bye now.